Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Matthew Posa, and this is Health from Within. Today we have a great guest. I was super excited to have her on the show today. She is our first video and interviewee. So this is the first time that we're doing this. So I hope there's no bugs. We tried to work them out before, but I want to welcome to the show Marilia Pereira. She is a holistic nutritionist and a bunch of other things, which I'm sure she's going to fill us in about. And I had the pleasure of working with Marilia a few years ago now, in 2014, 15, and I think 16. No, even further back.
A little bit earlier.
Yeah, a little bit earlier. And I got to know her, exactly what she does, and she brings a ton of value. So I absolutely needed to have her here on the show. So let's get started. Marilia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. Such a pleasure to be here. And I'm so excited that you invited me along your show. So, I've listened to the episodes that you have, and I'm just excited to be here and, talk all things about the topic we have on hand today.
Well, yeah. So today we're going to be talking about, intermittent fasting. So, and this is a topic that I'm super interested about. I know a ton of patients keep asking me about it. They keep noticing that I'm losing weight, and I'm still eating a ton. Let's keep that, and not well. All right. So I know you're gonna have a thing about that, but it's working really well for me. And so I wanted to have you on the show in particular, just because I know you know so much about nutrition and just what we put into our bodies. And I just thought it was super important. So before we get into that, can you tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and maybe a little bit just more about you?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Marilia Pereira, as Matt said earlier. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist and culinary nutrition expert and clinical iridologist. So a few things thrown in there because I love to learn. And I know it's also adding more value to my practice, of course. I've been in practice for just over 10 years, mostly in the Kitchener-Guelph area, and obviously servicing clients online and through Skype, phone, etc., as is more relevant here during the COVID times. And so I've been in practice, just for this time. And I kind of got into, becoming a holistic nutritionist more organically the time I was a teenager. I mean, I was raised in a pretty holistic household, from my mom just kind of making and cooking everything from scratch, not really using medicine unless we absolutely needed to. So, and I only had a couple of visits to the hospital in my life, so I've been very fortunate, touch wood. So anyways, just the way I kind of got into it is, I noticed when I was younger, and this might have been around between ages 11 to 13, I was really struggling with my digestion. And particularly, I noticed I had cold and flu-like symptoms when I'd be eating certain foods. And I realized that it was always after I ate something like a sandwich or bread or maybe like a type of pasta or something with like lots of cream, or, my mom is a fantastic cook, so she made food from all over the world. So I kind of become a foodie as well, because I have an incredible palate and love for food. But in that, is really able to figure out like, oh, I feel bad from eating these foods. And I actually started doing a lot of research myself when I was really young, and, learned about just taking things out of your diet.
Right.
So once I started taking those foods out of my diet, I felt a lot better. And then I tried again. I'm like, just to figure out what's the correlation between my symptoms and how I was feeling and what I was eating. And I figured it out really quickly. I'm like, oh my goodness, all the stuff I've been reading about taking certain foods out, which I realized for myself at that time was, white refined carbs and gluten-rich foods was really the trigger for me at that time. I also learned earlier on that, I couldn't have dairy. So I was lactose intolerant early on. And also I stopped liking candy, like when I was around 8 to 10, because I got sugar headaches immediately. So it's really interesting, it's interesting that I was able to pinpoint that certain foods were my trigger very early on in my life. And so this kind of triggered my research throughout my teens into always looking at holistic and natural ways and natural remedies, and I bought all those natural remedy books when I was 16, 17 years old, into ways of figuring out things for my health, just out of pure interest in taking care of myself. Because every time I went to the doctors, I wasn't really satisfied with the answers they were giving me, and I wasn't really getting much change. Now, fast forward, I ended up going into the IT business, studying IT and business in university, going to IT and finance in my earlier career in corporate, the corporate career path. And then, I had a change in 2009. I started the Institute of Holistic Nutrition for my registered holistic nutrition or certified nutritional program certificate. And that's what kind of like really changed my life at that point. And I got into becoming a holistic health practitioner, holistic nutritionist, lifestyle coach, and really diving into, holistic health and really wanting to help people with their health, because I'm like, if I'm having all these problems and I see what's going on out there, I really want to help people with other natural solutions into managing different health issues.
Right. And I totally, coming from the chiropractic point of view, we always said, toxins, the things that we put into our bodies can actually cause subluxation. But I think in your case, and I think a lot of people are waking up to it, I think people are more receptive to obviously nutrition, probably more than ever right now. Like you talk about nutrition and everybody's like, yes, I get that. But they don't really know exactly what it is or exactly what they can do about it. So having these conversations, I think, are super important. And you've had quite the journey. So I know you know, and you're really into it. I mean, you started, like you said, so young. So you're so into it, which is great. It's like being a vegan or something. It's like you can't take it out of you. It's part of you. And
yeah, it becomes your lifestyle. It's your lifestyle, right? So
exactly.
It's nice to develop these habits earlier on, because it sets you up for good health throughout your life. But also it's interesting that when you kind of steer away from it at times, like I did in university, eating a little bit more fast food at that time, like we most do in our early 20s when we're studying and cramming in all of our studying and just kind of grabbing whatever we need to fuel our brains. I made some mistakes at that time and I really felt it, right? So it's good to have these experiments and trials with yourself, because it is good to recognize these signs and symptoms and really establish a connection with your body, with yourself, and how you feel. Because your body is constant, as you know, with chiropractic, in constant communication with yourself. And it's up to us to pay attention to these signs and symptoms, to maybe keep track of them, log them, and do something about it. And just know that you know yourself better than anyone else does, but you have to pay attention.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's definitely leading me down the path of asking you a lot about intermittent fasting. I think intermittent fasting, I don't know how new it is. So I know maybe you could talk to that, but it seems like over the last couple of years, it's definitely hit the scene a lot harder. Same with ketones, right? Being the ketogenic diet, that like really took off. But I think I started looking into the keto thing, and then all of a sudden I started hearing about intermittent fasting, and I watched a couple of documentaries, and I'm watching all these, these shows, and I'm reading these books, and they're all talking about all these health experts from around the world talking about, how our gut heals, how it's important to fast, like the whole fasting thing. They talk about it all the way back in the Bible, all the way to today. So it's, again, there's a lot of reoccurring things that are happening. And I read the Blue Zones, which is a cool, if people don't know about it, select communities around the world that live longer, they're healthier. So I'm like, well, what are they doing? What's happening? So I started to do that, and I cheat a little bit. So I'll talk about my cheat, and you can tell me how bad it is. Yeah, I cheat a lot, but so this is my understanding, and this is what I do. So, and by all means, feel free to stop me at any point. So I basically stop eating. So sometimes it's late over here, right? I finish pretty late some nights, so that really sucks. But I got on this whole thing where I try not to eat at least 3 hours before I sleep. And I use the Oura Ring. I don't know if you know about the Oura Ring, but the Oura Ring tracks a whole bunch of stuff at night. And I just noticed I stop eating and I stop snacking. And what happens is, you know, I'm sleeping on a more empty stomach, and my scores the next morning are so much better. My body's resting. My body temperature was down. My heart rate, my heart rate variability, like all these things got so much better because I was eating less at night. So I was waking up into the morning being a little bit more empty. And then one of the things I also notice is when I have a breakfast, let's say I have, you know, bacon, eggs, you know, caveman food, and I'm no bread, but you know, I'm eating that, I would get hungry so much sooner. Like all of a sudden it was like, so let's say 9 o'clock I ate. By the time like 12 hits, I'm starving. It's like, I don't know what it was. I was starving, but I was very lethargic. I find that by the time I got to lunch, I just wanted a light lunch, like nothing too crazy, but because I just felt still full from the morning. Like like my body just went through so many ups and downs. So I started this. So 2 years ago, I actually started intermittent fasting 2 years ago. So you know, what time is it now? It's 11:15. I still didn't eat yet. I've had a black cup of coffee and that's it. Like that's my morning. Now, a lot of people are like, that's wrong. Like that is 100% wrong. And they might be right. So you can tell me, but they say, you know, you need to have that breakfast. It's so important for you to eat in the morning. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You know, you need to fuel your body. You need to give it that fuel to get through the rest of the day. A lot of people have the analogy of putting like starting a fire, and all you have to do is keep the fire going all day. So I understand that analogy, but when I don't eat, I'm fasting all morning, I have more energy, I think clearer, and then after my morning, after seeing a ton of patients, I go to the gym, I kill it at the gym, and then I eat. That's how I do it. And I've been doing that for, like I said, the last 2 years. And I couldn't believe how I felt. And then I'm reading all these books, and I forget the name of the book right now. I was trying to think of it on my way over here. But it's a guy that interviews, I'll put it in the show notes so people can see it. But it's a guy that interviews all these leading experts from around the world and all these, you know, these health gurus. And it's like, what are they all doing? And they're all intermittent fasting. Most of them, I can't say all, are doing some type of ketone thing. And so I was like, wow, these guys are all doing it. So it just really helped confirm it. So now I'm like a steadfast intermittent faster. So that's my thing. And now what I started doing, so I told you I was cheating. One of the things that I do is I use ketones in the morning. So the whole bulletproof movement, bulletproof coffee, but I don't do the stick of butter and the MCT oil. What I've done is I've cheated even more, and I have a pack from that company called Prove It, and it's the exogenous ketones.
Right.
You put it in, it's a coffee creamer. There's no cream, and it's got even collagen in it. So it's got a lot of, so it's got good fats, collagen, and I drink that, and I'm like on fire. Like my brain is going on. Like I feel so good. I do not want to eat. I am not hungry. And sometimes I'll go 2 o'clock, 3. Well, I work usually again at 3, so I try to eat a little bit before, but I could skip all the way up to dinner easily. And so is that good?
All right, so there's a lot of things packed in there. I'm going to try and break it down. So just going back a little bit to how you started, kind of your journey to intermittent fasting. Yes, there's so much ongoing research right now, and a lot of things we're discovering about ancient civilizations that have been practicing intermittent fasting. You know, we've seen in Ayurvedic medicine, there's a lot of health benefits. You mentioned it was also mentioned in the Bible, yes, for sure. So we know it's been done in the past, and so this is nothing new. But it's kind of like, excuse me, we're being reintroduced to these old concepts of eating, right? And kind of like why it's occurred in history, and now, you know, how we're adapting it to our modern day lifestyle, and the why of why we're doing it in our modern day lifestyle. So I think it's important to kind of, just a little bit of explanation for, everyone who's watching or listening in. So intermittent fasting just really means you are not eating for a certain amount of period of time. Generally, for most people, it's between 14 hours to 16 hours. Some people take it further to 18 hours, right? So in your example, let's say you're eating your dinner 7, 8 p.m. and you're not eating or breaking your fast until noon. Okay, so you're doing, you're on the high end of that scale of the fast, which is why breakfast used to be called breakfast, because you're breaking your fast, right? So most people do it that way because, you're sleeping for 8 hours, really easy to do in the morning. A lot of people don't, wake up wanting to eat. So it's just kind of really easy to do it from your dinner to, around 11, 12 o'clock. I'd say between 10 and 12 p.m. most people will have that first meal. Now, some of the things that you were, explaining, and how you had higher energy levels, mental clarity, all that goes exactly into some of the health benefits of intermittent fasting. So yes, improved mental clarity, better digestion, more energy, helps with metabolism, improves cardiovascular health. It also works on improving our immune system. You have more energy because obviously you're having less food throughout the day, and digestion requires or takes up the most energy in our bodies. I mean, it takes up the most. And also you're working on, supporting a healthy heart, managing healthier insulin levels. And, those are just some of the most, major, and obviously weight loss, which is the reason why a lot of people are doing intermittent fasting. But there's a way to do it. And it's also not for everybody. As you know, all of our health is unique and individual. So for you, when you were explaining how you kind of do your intermittent fasting, it's interesting because you mentioned that meal, your first meal being like eggs and bacon. So I meant to ask you at that time what time you had that meal, because that would be considered a high fat, high protein meal, which is actually a really good kind of meal to have as your first meal when you're doing intermittent fasting. Because you want to have a high protein, high fat, low carb, or a high protein, high fat meal. And I would also add in like a fiber. So into a meal like that. Is that on my?
Yeah, no,
okay.
There's somebody calling in the office.
Sorry.
So
I would add into something like that, maybe like half an avocado, if that still wasn't enough food for you and you're feeling hungry after a meal like that, right?
Right.
And of course, we all have different metabolism and our weight and height. So you kind of have to eat for, you, right? So that's a really good kind of balanced meal to have as your first meal, because obviously high protein, high fat is going to give you that energy to take you through hours with having you feel satisfied. So that feeling of satiety with low cravings, right? And so, and even that, the beverage that you had this morning, your healthy collagen, bulletproof elixir,
yes,
is fantastic. So that would naturally, because you're getting the high fat in that, so it's going to take you through and keep you satisfied until you have your first meal at noon or whenever that is for you, right?
Right.
So that's definitely, in terms of intermittent fasting, that's a good way to go. But it's not for everybody. And some people, I've heard that tried it. They're like, I can't, it's too long for me. Or they start experiencing other health issues, like they're not able to sleep, they're waking up in the middle of the night, so if that's the case, then what else is going on with your health? And when we get into intermittent fasting, it is important to consider blood sugar levels, your adrenals, and your thyroid for all the hormonal balancing issues that are involved in that. So
is there anybody that shouldn't do it? So you're saying like diabetics?
Well, I don't think it's about, it could be about shouldn't do it, and then it can also be about how you're going to get started in doing intermittent fasting. Okay. Because a lot of people will be like, oh my goodness, I read this book, I saw this online, I'm going to start intermittent fasting tomorrow. That was me. But the thing is you want to make sure that you have healthy blood sugar levels before you decide to do intermittent fasting. And you have to establish that baseline for yourself. So if you're someone who maybe was eating 5 to 6 meals prior to starting intermittent fasting, and you're doing it for weight loss. So you're eating and you're snacking a lot in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden now you do 16 hours with no food that very next day, you're going to feel really different and probably hungry and probably hangry because
Totally.
you haven't established your healthy blood sugar levels to be able to get to that point where you're going to be able to support intermittent fasting. So I was talking about somebody with, let's say hypoglycemic or thyroid issues or adrenal issues. Those are the three that I can start off mentioning right now that would require some time and guidance and into getting into that intermittent fasting mode, or somebody who's really wanting to focus on weight loss as well. Because I'd really be looking into how are they eating, how many meals are they having prior to starting intermittent fasting. Right. And just to keep it simple, I think it's easier to kind of, first of all, start with having a high protein, high fat diet, 3 meals a day for a couple of weeks before starting intermittent fasting to establish your baseline. So you have a really good full loaded breakfast when you wake up, rich nutrient dense breakfast, so high protein, high fat, good quality food. I'd add in good quality fiber into there too. You have a good full lunch and a good full dinner, no snacking in between, because what happens is ideally we want to wake up with high cortisol levels, right? There are circadian rhythm. You want to wake up with high cortisol levels in the morning. And that's how we're designed as humans. Cortisol gives you energy. It's the get up and go. So you want to have high cortisol when you're waking up in the morning or whenever that morning is for you. Some people work shift work, so that's getting into a whole different cycle, but it's an important consideration. So you want to wake up high cortisol. Throughout the day, it starts to come down early afternoon, and that's okay because then you start to produce melatonin to get you set up late. So for people who wake up with high cortisol levels and you don't eat, so let's say the person who's just starting, they wake up with high cortisol levels, they don't eat, they eat maybe till 12 o'clock, those first few days they try it, and they're really hungry. Well, what happens is that cortisol is high, but what happens is that when you are hungry, that kind of is like your body's in starvation mode, and that kind of is a stress for your body. So your body is stressing like, why don't I have food, right? When you have high cortisol and it spikes even further because your body is trying to figure out where it's going to get, glucose from to give you energy, that can further spike your blood insulin levels. Your body is trying to find glucose from somewhere. With intermittent fasting, the idea is to use fat as your energy stores. Right. But sometimes, the body will look into like, are we going to take glucose or energy from the liver, from your glycogen stores? You don't really want to do that. You don't want to take it from your muscles. So ideally, humans were designed to use it from taking away from fat and our carbs. But with intermittent fasting, we're really looking at using energy from our fat stores, right?
Right.
So
is it almost like better to do the ketogenic diet first? So you mentioned doing like the high fat, high protein diet for the first couple weeks. Yeah, 3 meals a day. Okay. With
no snacking in between, because you want your body to be able to have high cortisol go down, get energy go down, get energy go down, right? So you're establishing this good healthy rhythm, and then after a couple weeks, then you can start with a 14-hour fast, 16-hour fast, etc. Now, if you have a known thyroid or adrenal issue, that's kind of a little bit of a different approach there too, because you don't want things to get worse by doing intermittent fasting and kind of like messing up your whole cortisol production, insulin production, which can happen as a result of intermittent fasting for certain conditions. So if you have hyperthyroidism, so if you have an underactive thyroid, that's an important consideration. So for someone, for example, with an underactive thyroid, what they want to do is kind of do that couple weeks where you're having just 3 meals a day, really good nutrient dense meals, and then focusing on that, you're a good loaded breakfast, a good loaded lunch, and maybe skipping dinner, okay? Because they need to make sure that their waking cortisol levels and their cortisol levels in the morning are healthy. to set them up for a healthy adrenal function and healthy thyroid function. Because, and the reason why I mention that is there's a close, and this is kind of getting into a little bit more of hormone health, and I understand that, but this is important considerations when you're thinking about doing intermittent fasting, right? Like, again, it's not for everybody, and there's a way to do it, and there's a way to gradually get into doing intermittent fasting. But with your thyroid hormones, if you have underbalanced thyroid, your cortisol levels can get further increased when the adrenals are under stress, right? So then insulin gets high, cortisol levels get high.
Right.
High cortisol levels don't allow your body to properly convert our T4 hormone, which is produced by the pituitary gland, to the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland makes T4. Our cells and our liver are responsible for converting T4, thyroid hormone, to T3. When cortisol is too high, that conversion of T4 to T3 doesn't happen properly. So now you're going to further aggravate your thyroid health and, healthy T3 thyroid production, because your cortisol levels are too high. And that's impacting your adrenal glands. Adrenal glands, sit on top of the kidney glands, and they're responsible for our stress hormones as well as our sex hormones, and like a whole bunch of 60 plus hormones are involved in.
And the last thing you want to do is throw out your hormones, right? So
exactly.
So is there a difference then between men and women doing intermittent fasting? Like, because of the hormone thing? Like, so maybe men would have an easier time doing it?
Yes, and that's a really good point, Matt, because thyroid issues mostly affect women,
right?
But it can affect men.
Yep.
So men and women with any kind of thyroid issues, I'd first, get some blood work or work with the practitioner and getting your thyroid levels checked to make sure that's all good. And if not, then yes, you don't want to do that intermittent fasting of 16 to 18 hours a day. You do want to focus on 3 meals a day that are mostly high protein, high fat, low carb, to get you started off.
Okay, so let's just say, so I'm going to cut you off there.
It's okay.
Let's just say somebody's saying, okay, I want to try it. All right. And let's just say they don't have any of the other things. Okay. Because I understand. So definitely, if anybody's listening to this or watching, they're going to say, okay, I might have those things. I want to try intermittent fasting, but I'm going to go get that check first. Right. So go to a nutritionist such as yourself, go get some blood work. Who else would kind of help direct people with that? Like obviously yourself,
but a naturopath and also
naturopath.
their MD. They can, talk to their doctor about getting some hormone checks, their whole thyroid panel, adrenal glands, cortisol levels checked. It's good to kind of get your hormones checked if you suspect, and also if you've been clinically diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. That's another area that you want to consider. Just before you get started on intermittent fasting, because you really want to support your hormones first.
Absolutely.
Again, to not put yourself in a worse position afterwards, right?
You definitely don't want to, you don't want to throw that out. So now let's talk about the regular person. So not the regular person. Let's talk about
somebody who doesn't have those underlying health issues.
That's right. So somebody's like, okay, I want to try this. Right away, you mentioned maybe getting into some high protein, high fat diets, eating maybe a little bit less, so down to about 3 meals a day. And they do that for a couple weeks. And after they do that for a couple weeks, they can start just skipping breakfast.
That's right. So if they want to do that intermittent fasting, you would start with skipping breakfast. So it just depends on when that last meal was in the evening, whether it's 6, 7, or 8 p.m. And then they can start at 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. I would start at 14 hours and gradually build up.
So 14 hours from your last meal.
That's right.
Right. And then you would have your first meal.
Yeah. And that first meal, whatever you want to call it, breakfast, lunch, brunch, you just want that to be a highly nutritiously dense meal.
Right. So avocados. Are eggs good?
Yeah, eggs are fantastic because eggs are a powerhouse of nutrition.
Oh yeah.
They have the protein, they have phosphatidylcholine, healthy fats, DHA. I mean, the list goes on. B vitamins, vitamin E, zinc. I mean, all the minerals, all the supportive nutrients for good, healthy hormone function as well, right? Which when we're thinking intermittent fasting, really cravings food, appetite, all come down to hormones,
Right.
hormone function.
That's right.
It's what happens with your neurotransmitters and your hormone functions that governs your ability to eat, metabolize, burn calories, all of that. It all comes down to hormones, essentially. And that's why I was talking a lot about adrenals and thyroid, because that's the key right there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's really what we're trying to balance out. So that's that's almost like the end goal of doing all this. You get all the other health benefits that you maybe see or feel, but really internally those are, so it'd be kind of cool if you can, you know, if you're really into it, it's almost like I want to have my own blood testing kit at home, or like if they had like one of those pinprick things, and you can almost test all those things before and maybe a couple weeks into intermittent fasting, so you can see those results. Understandably, if you're with a naturopath, a nutritionist, if you're working with, you know, anybody that has that information that they can apply
you can
to
monitor that. That's right.
It's way better. Somebody like myself is just going by, yeah, I feel better. Like it's not, it's like it's working, so I'm not doing it. So what other types of meals? Because I think I'm, you know, is there a good time then to, so if I'm doing intermittent fasting, is there a good time to eat carbs? Is there ever a good time to eat carbs? Is there a good time to eat carbs?
Yes, and I mean, also keep in mind, fruits and veggies are carbs, right? And that's where
right.
you're getting a lot of antioxidants that I do a lot of repair work from oxidative stress in your body that are important for boosting our immune system, keeping our immune system strong and healthy, especially during the COVID time. So I don't want people to be scared of eating fruits and veggies.
Oh no,
but you'd want
the
to
opposite.
but you'd want to focus on the low glycemic fruits and vegetables that are not going to spike your blood insulin levels and are supportive. Mostly you're going to choose ones that are high fiber, low glycemic index, and that are well paired with, you know, whatever protein, high fat foods you're using. The avocados are such a great food because it's like an all-in-one almost of high fat, antioxidant, liver detox power, chlorophyll, your B vitamins, you know, it's just wonderful, fantastic hormone balancing food. But yeah, you know, walnuts, all the nuts and seeds, hemp seeds, chia, eggs, you know, if you're going to eat meat, good quality meat that's antibiotic free, hormone free, sustainably raised, humanely raised is how I always like to recommend meat. And then, you know, just again, having and making sure you're eating enough food. And then there's other considerations. Well, you know, what if you're working out and you're an athlete? You know, you have those meals are going to be big meals that you are going to have for either your breakfast, your first meal, or your dinner meal, right? So it's not going to be kind of what you're eating regularly, maybe as a smaller portions. You're going to have them more nutritionally dense meals, maybe slightly larger portions to support the nutritional intake your body requires for your energy use throughout the day.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of considerations by the sounds of it, like things I had no idea, to be honest, and this is why you're here. Just because there's a lot of other background things I don't think people would consider. Like myself, you hear intermittent fasting, that person's losing weight, they feel good. You know, patients are asking me all the time, what are you doing? You know, I show them the keto drink, I'm showing them all these type of things. And now I know to say, but, right? Like, but you need to, you know, and that's, I got a lot out of that. That was super helpful because I would have not known that. I would have not. So I know we're approaching our time here. So so if somebody wants to get a hold of you, somebody wants to listen, I want to reach out to her. How do they reach you?
Yes, so they can, I mean, I'm on social media. So on Facebook, it'd be Flourish Nutrition. And on Instagram, it's Flourish with Marilia. And Flourish is Fleurish with Marilia on Instagram. And of course, my website is flourishwithmarilia.com. And they can email me and contact me there with my contacts on my website as well.
Awesome. So I'm going to make sure that that's all the contact details are on the video, also in the show notes. So people will have access to that. And that way, you know, if they want to reach out, they want to ask you questions. Likewise, if people are watching this video on YouTube, anything like that, and they want to ask a question on there, And if I don't know how to answer it, by the sounds of it, I probably wouldn't. So I'll make sure to direct it towards you, and then maybe we'll get you to answer some questions for them.
Absolutely.
But you're not too far away from the clinic. I mean, you're in Guelph, so it's you're a great resource.
Very close by.
Yeah, so I'm sure some patients will make the trek. Not even the trek; they'll make the 20-minute drive over towards you, and they'll be able to get some help. So that was super useful. I think I'm really thankful. Thank you so much for joining the show, for being on, for taking the time to do this. I know your time is valuable, so I really do appreciate it. But I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. So
great.
It just
and
helps
there's so much more we could have gone into now. But I think that gives people a good starting point, and just a good starting point, and also just things to consider whether this is going to be a good idea for them, a part of their health goals for this year in the next few months, and just how to approach it, right? And to incorporate it into their lifestyles. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if they're thinking about it, definitely start. If you think you have some other underlying issues, definitely go get those checked. But I love intermittent fasting. I'm a huge fan. I'm going to keep doing it and get the benefits from it that way.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I'd love to have you on the show again. I think there's so many other topics.
There's so much we can talk about.
It is nuts.
And you know what's really great too is there's so much correlation and a really great relationship between chiropractic care and nutrition. I mean, those are some of the pillars of good health. So it's a nice complement with, us kind of working together and talking about these different health topics. So I'd be very happy to be on again and talk about the next topic.
Well, I already got a few in my brain right now. So I'll talk to you about that on the other side. But yeah, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.